On June 3rd, 1968, Valerie Solanas, radical feminist, author of a manifesto called SCUM, which stands for the Society for Cutting Up Men, Valerie Solanas came to Andy Warhol's factory, and she was looking for something. Valerie had written this play called Up Your Ass, and she had given it to Andy Warhol. And she knew that Andy Warhol was this guy who could make you famous. Andy Warhol's factory had blown up in New York City, and people from all walks of life were showing up because word had spread around the city that Andy Warhol might put you in his movies that he was making, and you didn't have to learn any lines. You didn't have to be a character. You didn't have to act. You could just come, be yourself. Andy would turn the camera on, and then you were famous for real. It was a fame factory. And so Valerie had written this play, Up Your Ass, and she knew that Andy was the guy. If anyone could do it, Andy could do it. He could get the word out. He could produce her play and make her famous. And Andy was like, yeah, Valerie, sure. Yeah. I will put you in a movie. And he did. And I will make you famous. And maybe I'll produce your play. So Valerie is thrilled. She can't believe her luck. She's in a Warhol film, and she gives Andy her play, and Andy takes it. And then he reads it, and he's like, this woman is a maniac. He actually thinks that Valerie is an undercover cop trying to entrap him, and he decides that it's too risky to do this play. This play is too crazy. It's too dangerous. It's obscene, and he says that he can't do it. The only thing is, he lost it. He lost Valerie's play. And Valerie, being somewhat detached from reality, gets it in her head that Andy didn't just lose her play. He stole it. And he was going to steal her work and take it for himself and push her out. She was a little bit delusional. She was a little bit paranoid, maybe a lot paranoid. And so in retaliation for losing her script, Valerie comes to the factory and she shoots Andy Warhol on June 3rd, 1968. And Andy is rushed to the hospital. In fact, he is literally dead for like 2 minutes. And it's only because his friends came with him to the hospital and told the doctors, hey, this guy is famous, you need to save him, that the doctors were like, oh, okay, I guess we'll try a little harder. And they did save him, and he did not die. And then the very next day, Robert Kennedy was assassinated, and all of the news went to Robert Kennedy's assassination. And so Andy's 15 minutes of fame were up. Nobody cared that he was shot anymore because he didn't die, except for one person. One person really cared. Billy Name, Andy Warhol's right-hand man, the person who put the silver tinfoil on the walls of the factory, the person who really brought all the cool people to the factory, the person who actually kind of invented the factory. He cared a lot. And he was living at the factory. Billy Name was the grounds person for Andy Warhol's silver factory. He was the electrician. He was kind of the jack of all trades that kept the whole thing running. He was living in the bathroom. It was doubling as his dark room because Billy was a photographer. And after Andy got shot, Billy locked himself in the bathroom for 18 months. He only ate Campbell's soup, which is, if you know anything about Andy Warhol, the soup is very important. Lou Reed and Ondine, another person at the factory, would take turns dropping off Campbell's soup in front of the door, but Billy did not leave. He stayed in the bathroom for 18 months, and all he did the whole time he was in the bathroom was make astrological charts for June 3rd, 1968, the day that Valerie shot Andy. For 18 months, Billy sat in a dark bathroom and made the same chart over and over and over. Pretty kooky. So today, Hi, my name is Kate. I am the creator of The Factory, which is an immersive show about Andy Warhol's factory. And the premise is very simple. You, as the audience, are invited to a party at the factory where you can sit for your own screen test. You can rock out with the band. You can silk screen paintings. You can help participate in filming an underground movie. And you might even be named Andy Warhol's next superstar. It is a very wild, crazy show. I have been telling you all about it here on the internet for a while. We just did a workshop in February, and I am now seeking commercial investors and producers for the full theatrical run in the fall of 2025. So if you are one of those people, please let me know. I would love to talk to you. And to that end, I do have to say my show is fiscally sponsored by an organization called Fractured Atlas. And they are doing a spring match giveaway right now. So if you are watching this like the day that this is posted, you can go to the link in the description and donate. And every donation that I get entered into a contest to win $1,000 for the project. So it doesn't matter how much you donate. If you can donate $1, that counts. All I need is donations, and I am not allowed to enter myself. So the only way I can get entered into this contest to win $1,000 is if you donate. That is how I get entries. I can get as many entries as people donate. There's no cap. So if you have spare change that you would like to send my way and help me maybe win $1,000, that would be awesome. If not, totally get it. Economy's crazy. Things are wild. I understand. But I just wanted to put that out there because it is happening right now. So with all that being said, this video is going to be a little different than my usual, but let's get into it. Let's talk about the stars and time and astrology and the factory. So this is kind of a different type of video. As I mentioned, it's going to be a little more loosey-goosey, a little less scripted than my normal videos, because we're going to get spooky. We're going to get into the astrology of it all. And you may notice by this little wall hanging behind me, I'm very into astrology, and I have been for a very, very long time. But there's a reason why I'm talking about it in the context of Andy Warhol and the factory. It's not just that I'm obsessed and I need to mash these two things together. It's that there's a lot of very interesting things that I need to say. So this is ultimately a video about time. It's about repetition. It's about myth. It's about memory. There's all of these things that are kind of linked together when we talk about astrology. And this is also a chance to connect some dots. If you have watched some of my other videos, you may hear some familiar stories and some familiar people, but we're going to kind of take a look at them in a more big picture sense. So if you've watched my Jackie Curtis video or my Billy Name video or my Bobby Driscoll video, the things that I talk about in those videos, we're going to wrap them into this one. So I'm excited. Let's jump into it. So to give very brief background, again, I have a full video about Billy Name if you want to learn the full Billy Name story, but just to kind of let you know if you didn't watch that video, Billy Name was Andy Warhol's right-hand man. And Billy Name was plugged into this community known as the Mole People. So the Mole People were this fiercely intelligent, wild group of like artists / performance artists / opera lovers / homeless drug addicts. They were all of these things. And the thing that drew them together was their shared mutual love of amphetamines. They loved amphetamines and they loved opera. Those were the two things that really drew the Mole People together. And so most of them they existed in varying states of homelessness. Some of them had homes. Some of them came from quite wealthy backgrounds. Bridget Berlin being one of the Mole People, who is like one of the most wealthy people in the country at the time, at least her family. She was the heiress of the Hearst Media Corporation. She was a mole person, but then there are also people like Ondine who was living in Central Park. So like everyone they didn't have jobs, that's for sure. They would just sleep all day. That hence the mole person name. They were very pale because they did not see the sun. They would, exist in their hovels during the day and work on getting amphetamines and doing what they needed to do to survive. And then when the sun went down, they would emerge and they would party every night at different locations. And their parties had to float around because they were, unsavory people. They were criminals. They were not mainstream. And so they always had to move their parties around until Billy Name met Andy Warhol. Billy Name was a mole person, but he did have a job. He was a lighting designer and he worked with various dance companies lighting their dance shows. And he also was a waiter at kind of this famous gay restaurant called Serendipity 3. And so Billy gets introduced to Andy Warhol, I believe, through Serendipity 3. Andy would go to Serendipity 3. All the waiters at Serendipity 3 were like these young, hot gay boys. And so Billy Name was one of these very dreamy gay boys that worked at Serendipity 3. Andy Warhol kind of took a liking to him. And Billy is obsessed with the cosmos. He's obsessed with astrology. And so he's a mole person, so he's also obsessed with amphetamine. So Billy Name, in kind of an amphetamine-induced mania, had covered his whole apartment in tinfoil. And he was also this jack of all trades. And so he had a lot of skills. And one of his skills that he had was giving haircuts. And so he started throwing these hair cutting parties at his apartment. And Andy Warhol comes to one of these hair cutting parties and he walks in and he is just like shocked by what he sees. It's this apartment that is covered floor to ceiling in tinfoil, and all these beautiful people are there getting their hair cut. And he's just like, this is amazing. It needs to be a movie, because he had just bought this like 18 millimeter Bolex camera and he's experimenting with making short films. And so he's like, Billy, I just signed the lease at this new studio space in Midtown Manhattan. Would you please come and do this whole silver thing to my new studio? And Billy's like, yeah, of course. And so Billy actually moves into this new space. It's on East 47th Street in Midtown. And he gets to work fixing the electricity. It had kind of been this rundown factory. And so he like cleans it up, makes it safe to work in, and he puts silver tinfoil everywhere, floor to ceiling, everywhere. And now that he lives at this big studio, the mole people who formerly had to move their parties around, they now have a home base. And so all these kooky, crazy amphetamine freaks that love opera start to hang out at the factory, and they make the atmosphere crazy. And so Andy Warhol was this kind of shy, demure guy who looked kind of weird and was socially awkward. He was not, especially at the time before he became famous, Andy Warhol. Once he became famous, all of his weirdness kind of worked. It like gave him a mystique of this like weird famous artist. Before he was a famous artist, he was just a weirdo. So he didn't have a lot of friends, but Billy did. And so Andy is there producing his art. Meanwhile, Billy and the mole people are there making the factory like this wild, crazy, cool place to be. So that's the lay of the land when we get to the factory. Now I have to share another little tidbit of information about somebody who showed up at the factory around this early time. Bobby Driscoll. Bobby Driscoll was a very famous child star in the 1940s and the early 1950s. He was the very first real actor that was signed to the Disney Corporation. His first Disney film was Song of the South, which is on its own, that's a whole other video really, but very controversial film. And he starred in a number of films. He was like very, very well known in this period. And he was even awarded the Juvenile Actor Award, which they don't award anymore. That's not a thing. But he's like an Oscar-winning actor as a kid. And in his teen years, he is cast as both the voice and the physical model for Peter Pan when Disney made Peter Pan. And so he's in this role. Unfortunately for Bobby, he experienced what is tragically a very common tale in the world of child stardom. He became not cute, essentially. He gained a little bit of weight, he got acne, his voice was changing, and he just wasn't a cute kid anymore. And this happened as they were creating Peter Pan. So they filmed Peter Pan, and as Peter Pan is still in its theatrical release, it's still being shown like in theaters, Disney cuts Bobby Driscoll from his contract. They drop him early. And so Bobby, while Peter Pan, the film, is still like riding high, it's in theaters, he is cut loose and he really starts to struggle. He's bullied at school for being a child star, and he gets into weed, and then that turns into a heroin addiction like really fast, and he ends up getting arrested for drug possession in LA, and he just struggles. He can't get work anymore. He can't get cast. The only roles that he gets cast in his like late teen years are like bully kind of roles. Like he looks mean, whereas he used to look really cute. And so he's just feeling very rejected, and he decides to move to New York City to try and make it on Broadway. And same thing, he goes to Broadway auditions, it doesn't really work out, and by the like mid to late 60s, early to mid 60s, he finds himself at the Factory. And Bobby's last film appearance was in this Warhol film called Dirt, and he plays a nun. And so he's at the Factory, and then not long after his appearance in Dirt, Bobby disappears, and no one really knows what happens to him. Turns out he had overdosed on heroin in an abandoned tenement building in the Lower East Side, and his body had been discovered by two kids. No one knew that it was Bobby Driscoll, and he was buried in a pauper's grave on Hart Island, an unmarked John Doe kind of grave. And no one knew that he had even died. Nobody cared. And it wasn't until Song of the South was re-released in the 1970s that some reporters were trying to do a like, where is he now kind of article. And they started like looking into what happened to him. And it was because these reporters looked into it that they discovered that Bobby had passed away. And it's a tragic, like deeply tragic story. And it actually was this story, this Bobby Driscoll story, that got me interested in Andy Warhol in the first place. I discovered this Bobby Driscoll story as like a 12-year-old, like long ago. And it just like really stuck with me. It was, I don't know, there's something about it that was so tragic. And it wasn't the first time that I had heard about a child star having a tragic life, unfortunately, but it was something about Peter Pan, this like child that never grows up, meeting such a tragic end, alone, abandoned in a building, and then buried in an unmarked grave, and nobody knew that he had died. Like, it just is spooky and sad, and there's so much in it that just like wormed its way into my brain, and I couldn't let it go. And at the time, as a 12-year-old, I was like, and wait, who was Andy Warhol? And what is the Factory? And where was he? Like, what is this place? Because it sounds scary. It is scary. So that was my entry point into the Factory. It was not the soup cans. It was not the art. It was not the superstars. It was not any of the glamorous parts of the Factory. It was this horrifying story that got in my brain that I couldn't get out. And so my show, The Factory, is not about the soup cans. It's not about the art at all. We do not talk about the art at all. It's about this place, this scary place, and what it really means. It's a very existential kind of show. It's not about art. I mean, it is about art, but it isn't about It's not a biopic. It's not a documentary. You don't need to know anything about Andy Warhol to enjoy my show, and you will leave still not knowing really anything about Andy Warhol. Although I have to say, literally every moment in the show is based on something that really happened. So like, it is about Andy Warhol. All the characters are based on real people. It is deeply about Andy Warhol's factory, but it's very non-linear. It is not a beat by beat breakdown of what happened in a historically accurate way. Let's put it like that. So it's like being there. It's like existing in the factory. So now let's talk about astrology. I'm going to keep this relatively brief because I could really talk a lot about astrology, but what I really want to hit in this video is that astrology is about seeing time in a circular way. We always think of time as linear. We're moving through our lives in a straight line, but that's not really how time works. Time is a cycle, and when you pull back and look at the universe, you see our solar system moving in this circular way. All of the planets are moving at their own pace, their own speed around the solar system. And it's the relationship between the planets and how they're moving that kind of makes astrology what it is. So astrology really is our most ancient way of observing time. Way, way back when we were just people who roamed the earth without society the way it is now, our like most ancient ancestors, they didn't have writing. They only had looking up at the stars and trying to make sense of where they were at. And so that was the earliest version of like tracking time, was looking up at the sky and being like, oh, that little light up there was there last year around this time. It was cold and that light was there, and that light's back and it's cold again. What does it mean? So it was like, as we developed as humans, we started to notice patterns. That is our ultimate skill as human beings, is pattern recognition. And so we start to make sense of the sky, and we use it to make sense of the world around us and to notice patterns. And also in these early days, we did not have writing and books, and we passed down history and lessons about the world through oral storytelling and myths. And so we started to link oral storytelling tradition and myth to the stars. And people didn't take it literally. People knew that it wasn't like there weren't really, these mythic stories of gods or whatever. People knew that it was a storytelling tool to impart lessons about life. And so we still have this tool today, and it's still a way that we can make sense of our place in the bigger picture. It's not about fortune telling, although some people use it that way. In my mind, it's not about fortune telling. It's not about predicting the future. It's about making sense of where we are at in time, using myths as a tool of self-reflection. So a lot of people, even say that they believe in astrology, or they don't believe. That's what you hear more often, is people kind of being dismissive about astrology. And I understand why, but it's not, to me, it is not about believing. I don't believe in astrology. It's a language that I've learned. It's like a tool that I can use, because I don't believe that Pluto is in Aquarius right now. Pluto is in Aquarius right now. It just is. It's not a matter of belief. That's just where the planet is in the sky. And so now, whether or not you think that means something, that's a different story. But it is, Pluto currently is in Aquarius. It just is. So that's kind of like my basic spiel about astrology. It's really more of a language. And just like Spanish is spoken in different dialects all over the world, so is astrology. There is whole sign and Hellenistic and Vedic and all these different ways that people think about astrology all around the world. So it's a language. It's not, and you're not going to get, like, it's not a church. You can't get excommunicated from astrology if you don't believe the right way. There is no person in charge of astrology. It's just a way to make sense and give ourselves context for what's happening and what could happen and when this has happened before and what happened the first time around. I feel like I'm rambling, but I love astrology. But something that is like key to the understanding of astrology is that planets return. Everything is a cycle. Every year on your birthday, the sun is back in the place that it was when you were born. So it's all about the planets coming back to the same places again and again and again. But every time it happens, you are different. It means something different this time. So it's about repetition and also seeing the newness in what has already happened. It's not linear progress. It's like a spiral growth. And so in astrology, archetypes become this really important way of communicating meaning. And we see it in mythology all the time. So like, an archetype, for example, might be the Fool. The Fool is a tarot card, and it's an archetype, and it means, it's seeing things in a new way, being a beginner, learning something for the first time, looking at something upside down, taking things lightly, like changing your perspective. Those are all things that could be associated with the Fool. So I use the astrology wheel, the most ancient symbol of circular time, to write a show about Andy Warhol's factory. And the way that I did it is pretty cool, in my opinion. There are 12 characters, and each male character has a female counterpart. So it's these 12 archetypes. They represent real people. Every character is based on a real person, but each character also represents an archetype that is bigger than themselves. And so we have these sets. We have Gerard and Mary, and then Candy and Ondine, Lou and Edie, Bridget and Paul, Billy Name and Dorothy, Andy and Valerie. And so each set has its own storyline. So it's these 6 storylines that are circling each other. So for example, Mary and Gerard, they're dancers. They have a very kinetic, intense physical energy, kind of like Mercury, the planet that moves really fast. They are the fast moving planets, and they feel each other, and there's intensity to it, and they're up close and personal. And then as we move outside to the end of the circle, we have Valerie and Andy. They don't really interact with each other at all. They hate each other. They're like circling each other slowly like sharks along the perimeter of the story. Their storyline is really big. It's like Valerie's like a Pluto. Pluto is the planet of the underworld, and it moves really slow. It takes about 16 years for Pluto to move from one sign to another. And Pluto is the planet of the underworld. It pulls up all this deep, dark stuff to the surface because we need to face it. Pluto is about showing us what's not working anymore and making us look at the rot in our society so that we can do something about it. It's not pleasant, but it's necessary. We can't fix what's broken if we don't know what's broken. So that's what Pluto is all about. And so Valerie and Andy's story is kind of like the Pluto story of the solar system of the factory, moving slow and dark and heavy and bringing up what is not working. So that's kind of, the characters are like the planets in the world of the factory. They are moving, they are on their own cycles, they are moving at different paces, but they are all moving in this solar system. Then we have the houses, which are the scenes. So the factory is an hour-long show, and it is modeled after a clock. So the first scene is noon, and then it's basically 12 5-minute scenes. We work our way around the clock until we get to midnight. Midnight is the same scene as noon, but now everything's different because you have seen the whole show. So when the show restarts, even though it's the same show, you see it through new eyes. And you can follow different storylines and different characters and see what else is happening within the context. And then, of course, there is the superstar. The superstar is every rotation of the show, a new audience member is chosen to be Andy Warhol's new superstar. And they are kind of like the central plot point of the factory. There's this constant cycle of elevation and discard where we have a new superstar. They get to experience their rise to fame, their own 15 minutes of fame. We bring them up to the top and then we pull them back down, and they get to experience the fall part of 15 minutes of fame, and then they get kicked out of the factory at the end, and as the show restarts, they get pulled right back in and they're back in with the audience, and a new superstar is chosen. So the superstar is kind of like the sun of the solar system in the factory. Every new superstar is like the new birth chart point. It's the new birthday. It's the new sun cycle. It's the focus, the soul of the story. So it's the same story over and over and over, but every time it's a little bit different because there's a new person as the superstar. And then there's this mythic element of Warhol getting shot. That's how the show ends. Warhol gets shot, but then it restarts. And that is a nod to real life. Andy Warhol was shot but did not die. And when Andy was shot and did not die, it turned him into like this living ghost. He becomes mythologized in real time. And it's also kind of like this Christ-like story of like him being like the leader of all of these people, being shot, and then having this resurrection moment of like coming back to life and coming back to life, like larger than life and as this like icon. So he becomes like a living myth, essentially. Okay, now one more little thing that I have to tell you about is Jackie Curtis. And I will keep this, again, so brief. You can watch my Jackie Curtis video if you want to dive into that whole story. But Jackie Curtis was one of Warhol's superstars, and she wrote this play called Heaven Grand in Amber Orbit, which ran off Broadway, and it was a huge success. And she wrote this show using found dialogue. So this was actually a Dada era art style where Jackie pulled all this dialogue from movies and plays and interviews and books and like pulled all these different dialogue sources and kind of cut and paste them into a new play. So Heaven Grand in Amber Orbit was written with all the dialogue coming from all of these different places that Jackie cut and pasted and rearranged into this new show. So I was inspired by this. I wrote The Factory using the cut and paste method. All the dialogue comes from all of these outside sources: books, movies, films, TV shows, interviews. And the only rule that I gave myself was that it had to tie back to The Factory in some way. Now, I promise this has an astrological meaning. Astrology is the language of resonance. It is not about making things up. It's about seeing the pattern in what is already there. So I didn't write The Factory. The Factory already existed. I just saw it and rearranged it. It's like a transit hitting the same degree again, but this time you see it in a new light. It means something different, even though maybe you recognize the line, it means something different in a new context. And this really works because famous phrases can carry myth with them. Like astrology, the meaning comes from placement, context, and timing. So for example, the way this might work in my show, there is this line at the beginning. When Candy Darling first makes her entrance, she steps out of her dressing room, which is Billy's bathroom that she has been hiding in. She steps out and Ondine says, "This has all happened before and it will all happen again. But this time it happened here, the home of the Darling family. Andy chose this place because there were people here who believed in him." The only word I changed was I changed the word Peter to Andy. Everything else is word perfect, a line from Peter Pan. But because I've placed it in The Factory, and maybe you've heard it before. If you've seen Peter Pan, if you've read the play, you have heard this before, and it meant something in the context of Peter Pan. But now you hear it in The Factory, and we pulled all of these things into it. There's a nod to Bobby Driscoll, the lost boy of The Factory, who made his last film appearance in Andy Warhol's film. So you can think about that. And then we have the link between the darling children in Peter Pan and Candy Darling. Just happened to have the same name, worked out really well. And then we have belief. Andy chose this home, the Darling home, because there were people here who believed in him. Candy Darling was this trans woman who, especially at the time, felt that she could not really be who she actually was in the real world. Her identity was rejected as a trans woman in the 1960s. She could not be herself out in the real world. The only place that she could truly be Candy Darling was in the factory. And so she believes in Andy almost to a point of desperation, because she needs the factory to be real for her to be real. And so now we have this other layer of like belief in Andy coming through Candy Darling. And then you bring your own memories of where you had Peter Pan stored in your brain, and maybe childhood memories come up. So we have all of a sudden all of these things, all of this stuff being pulled when Ondine says, this has all happened before and it will all happen again, but this time it happened here, the home of the Darling family. And it's true in the context of the show looping, because the characters know that they are trapped in this endless cycle. They know that the show is looping. They know they are doing this show for the audience. They are aware of the audience. So not only is it like, in this kind of like mythic sense, it's also in a literal sense. This has all happened before and it will all happen again, because we are stuck here, doomed to repeat this hour-long show forever. So this dialogue is like, in this astrological sense, you come across it again and again and again, but every time it happens, you're in a new place and it means something new. And that's kind of how astrology works. What's really interesting to me too is that once I started looking for dialogue, it started popping out to me like in a really crazy way. I would know immediately when something worked in the show. And it's because of something really interesting. For something to make sense in a circular way, it has to make sense twice. It has to make sense the first time you hear it, as if you've heard it for the first time, it's brand new. But it also has to make sense the second time you hear it. And by that, I mean, the second time you hear it in the show, the characters know that they have already said it. So it has to kind of have this like double speakness to it. And I realized as I was searching for this dialogue that that's how abusers talk. People who are abusive, they leave themselves room to say, oh, you misunderstood me. I didn't mean it this way. I meant it that way. And the factory is also about the cycle of abuse. We're all about cycles here at the factory. And so, because I think that fame is a kind of abuse, and I think that Andy Warhol was kind of abusive in the way that he used and discarded people. And so I started to kind of be like, oh my God, this is how the language of abuse sounds when it's put in this circular speaking way. And then I started to think about all of the people at the factory who had trauma. And that's the other thing that ties all these people together, is their shared history of traumatic experiences. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you probably have noticed the same thing, that when I dive into the backstories and the childhoods of all these factory people over and over and over, it's like childhood abuse, childhood abuse, childhood abuse. Everyone here is dealing with trauma. And so that's the other thing. The final kind of piece of this puzzle is the way that trauma makes your brain loop. PTSD is like getting stuck in a time loop. When you get triggered into feeling like, you're in a traumatic event again, your body goes back to the trauma. And even though intellectually you know that it's not happening, your body feels like it is happening. And so you get trapped in these time loops. And so I started to think of all of these people in the factory as like children. They are emotional children that are stuck in different kinds of trauma. And so I started to think of the factory as like this photo-negative version of Neverland. It's this place that is, you never grow up. It's a fantasy world where you come to stay a child. And it's dark and it's scary and it's sad. It's not this like wonderful childhood fantasy, which, by the way, watch my Bobby Driscoll video because the story of Neverland is just dark. There's no happiness to it. It's very, very disturbing. Sorry if you didn't know that, but it's very dark. So to tie this all back to astrology and Billy name and what I've been rambling about in this video, Billy was both an astrologer. He was obsessed with astrology even before he got to the factory, but he was also somebody dealing with trauma. And so he dealt with the trauma of Andy getting shot by Valerie and the factory kind of being destroyed by shutting himself in the bathroom and making this chart, this astrological chart of June 3rd, 1968, over and over and over and over because he was traumatized. And so there's this like theme of repetition in so much of the Warhol story. It's in Warhol's art, the repetitive nature of the images repeating over and over and over. And then Billy's chart, locking himself in the bathroom, making the same astrological chart over and over and over. And then we have the astrology of it all, the looping nature of time itself, and the planets returning to the same places over and over and over. So that's what my show is. I think like I've been making these videos about my show since like last summer, and it has taken me this long to kind of get out all of this information about all of these people and what the factory was and why it happened this way to get to this point where I could explain to you what my show really is. My show is about stepping into that chart that Billy name made. It's like this mythical version of the factory. It is the time loop of the factory. It's about what was like esoterically happening in this space. And so that's also why I took on Kate name as my stage name. It is in homage to Billy, because Billy is really the person who created the factory. Of course, it was Andy's art and Andy's work that got it recognized, but intellectually, it was Billy. And so I hope this video made sense. Leave me a comment if you liked this video, if you have any questions. I also want to say, I do astrology readings. So if astrology connects to you the way it connects to me, I would love to talk to you about it. I do Zoom astrology readings. I have different sessions for all different price points, from like 30-minute quick sessions to like 90-minute sessions. I can do your birth chart. We can dive into the whole thing, talk about your transits, talk about, anything that might be happening with you. Really, I'm flexible. So check out my website. It'll be linked in the description below. If you would like to book an astrology reading with me, it would be really fun. And I just want to leave you with this. This has all happened before, and it will all happen again. But this time it happened here with us. You and me, we're here together this time making sense of the cosmos. So I hope that your life's going well. Thank you for watching this video. Please hit subscribe, like the video. I always forget to say that, but it helps a lot. So yeah, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.